Star Wars: The Bad Batch recently reintroduced us to the Lequains, a clone deserter and his family that hid out on the planet Seleucami. Of the 4 members of the family, Cut, the deserter, was human, while his wife, Sue, was a Twi'lek. Their 2 kids, Jek and Shaiya, were human Twi'lek hybrids. Now, both The Bad Batch and Star Wars: The Clone Wars swept the hybrid nature of the Lequain kids right under the rug, but fans sure as hell noticed it. After all, since when were humans and Twi'leks genetically compatible? How many other species were genetically compatible? And how did cross-species hybridization work in the Star Wars universe? Today, we're going to be answering those questions.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
First things first, there's one small detail we need to clear up. Shaiya and Jek weren't Cut Lequain's kids, biologically speaking. Captain Rex first met Cut in 21 BBY, meaning he and Sue had only been together for a year at most by that point, as Cut deserted shortly after the Battle of Geonosis in 22 BBY. Since Shaiya was born in 26 BBY and Jek was born in 25 BBY, this means Cut was not the father. However, Shaiya and Jek have both been confirmed to be human Twi'lek hybrids anyway, so our opening question remains the same. Sue Lequain, it seems, just had a thing for human males. We don't understand why, but hey, we don't judge. Humans were compatible with more than just Twi'leks, however. They could produce hybrid offspring with Nagai, Thelans, Koinites, Ekani, Miraluka, Sith, Kifar, Pharaon, Hamadryas, Kalai, and Zabraks, and likely many other species as well. Of note is that all of these were humanoid species, and many of them were already very similar to humans in all but a few respects. It's also worth noting that there were also many species that humans weren't genetically compatible with, including Umbarans, Ratataki, Sand People, Anzadi, Kirash, and Keshiri. Interestingly, these incompatible species were all humanoid as well, and many appeared to have been much more similar to humans than, say, Sith purebloods were. Other species were capable of producing hybrid offspring with each other as well. The man, the myth, the legend, Valentine Farfalla, was half Bothan, though we don't know what the other half of his genetic history looked like. Arcanians were able to produce offspring with Cephi, and the Bornek species could reproduce with the Eti species. We will again emphasize that these were all human-like species, something that will become relevant later. It's possible, and even likely, that members of other similar species were able to hybridize, like Toygorians and Cathars, but we don't know of any confirmed examples of this. There doesn't seem to be much of a discernible pattern in terms of what traits human hybrids inherited from which of their parents. To return to the Lequains, Shaiya and Jek seem mostly Twi'lek, with only their odd skin pigmentation and Jek's eyebrows hinting at their mixed ancestry. However, other Twi'lek human hybrids have been known to look far more human. At the end of Star Wars Rebels, we got a quick glimpse of Jacen Syndulla, the hybrid child of Kanan Jarrus and Hera Syndulla, who looked mostly human, albeit with hints of green in his skin and hair. Since all 3 hybrids had Twi'lek mothers and human fathers, we can only assume that the distribution of traits in human Twi'lek hybrids was fairly random. We'd be remiss if we talked about hybrids without discussing the Dathomirians. They were human Zabrak hybrids known for making up the majority of Mother Talzin's Night Sister clan and the tribe of Night Brothers that served it. Members of this hybrid species were almost identical to either Zabraks or humans, with gender determining which species individuals were closer to. Male Dathomirians were virtually indistinguishable from Zabraks, though they had unusual skin colors for members of their species. Female Dathomirians, on the other hand, appeared near human, with only unusually pale skin distinguishing them from humans. There were a few examples of female Dathomirians who had horns like their male counterparts, but they were apparently quite rare. Why female Dathomirians had pale skin is a bit of a mystery, since the Zabraks certainly didn't. Indeed, female Dathomirians resembled Ratataki more than Zabraks. In saying that, we should note that the group of Zabraks the human ancestors of the Dathomirians reproduced with were from Ratatak originally, so they might actually have been hybrids themselves. Regardless, the Dathomirians were a strange case. It should also be noted that, according to Mother Talzin's book Wild Power, childbirth was considerably more dangerous for Dathomirians than it was for humans. According to Talzin, most Dathomirian females who had children either died in childbirth or came quite close, which was part of the reason why those who had multiple children, like Talzin herself, were revered by the Night Sisters. Since roughly every other Dathomirian child came out with a crown of vestigial horns, this high mortality rate does make sense, but it may also have indicated that the Dathomirians weren't a very stable hybrid species. For some added context on the matter of hybrids, let's take a quick look back at the real world. Hybrids are, of course, a real thing, though most real-world hybrids are plant species such as wheat. The idea of humans having viable offspring with similar species isn't all that detached from reality either. Our ancestors are believed to have bred with Neanderthals, for example. One noteworthy thing from the real world is that many hybrid species, like the mule, are sterile. This was likely the case for many Star Wars hybrids too, though we know the Dathomirians were an exception to that rule. We would also like to quickly note that for some real-world hybrids, offspring are only viable between males of one species and females of another, not the other way around. For example, only a female horse and a male donkey can produce a mule, not a male horse and a female donkey. We don't know if this was true with Star Wars hybrids, but considering the case of the Dathomirians, it might be. We've only seen human Twi'lek hybrids with Twi'lek mothers and human fathers. Now, humans in the Star Wars universe have been shown to be extraordinarily flexible, genetically speaking, as the galaxy's countless near-human species attest. Many species, including the Chiss, Kifar, and the Ikani, were believed to have descended from human colonists that diverged from the baseline human population, adapting to new homeworlds. While there were near-human species we can't prove descended from humans, most species that humans were genetically compatible with did fall into the near-human category, which might explain human hybrids a bit. However, that doesn't tell the full story. Twi'leks were not near-human, nor were Sith purebloods or Thelans. A more complete explanation may have been discovered by the Sith Empire on the planet Belsavis during the Cold War. While on the planet, Sith Inquisitor Darth Nox discovered a Ricardan construct that called itself the Mother Machine. Built during the last days of the Infinite Empire, the ancient galaxy-spanning domain of the Rakata, the Mother Machine was built by the Rakata to analyze their own genome, particularly the traits that led to Force sensitivity. In those days, the Rakata were beginning to lose their Force sensitivity, which was bad news for them, as almost all of their technology required use of the Force to operate. They hoped the Mother Machine would find a way to stop this decline, allowing the Infinite Empire to persist. Of course, their hopes were in vain, as the Infinite Empire ultimately collapsed in 25,200 BBY, following which the Rakata nearly wiped themselves out in a civil war back on their homeworld. None of the Rakata who survived were Force sensitive. However, while the Mother Machine didn't solve the Rakata's problems, she claimed to have done plenty of other genetic work on slaves the Rakata had provided to her. Among them were humans, who the Rakata had seeded across the galaxy due to their usefulness as servants. In experimenting on humans and other sentients, the Mother Machine claimed to have created the Twi'leks, Zabraks, Eshkar, and many other species, hence the name she chose for herself. It's unknown if any of this was actually true. The Rakata thought she was full of it, and researchers from both the Republic and Sith Empire were both inclined to doubt her story. If she was telling the truth, however, it would certainly explain a good deal about why humans were genetically compatible with so many species. So that's our look at hybridization in the Star Wars universe. But what do you think? Did you find this topic interesting, and are there others that you'd like us to see discuss in the future? Let us know all of that and more in the comment section below. And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.